Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. On this episode, I'm joined by Kat Toy from Blue Quill Angler. Kat shares her fly fishing journey and how she went from novice angler to Blue Quill guide in only a few years. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And a shout out to this episode's sponsor. This episode's sponsored by our friends at Norvise. Their motto is, tie better flies faster, and they produce the only vise that truly spins. The holidays and show season are just around the corner. Head over to www.nor-vice.com today to find the perfect gift for the tire on your list and to see if the folks from Norvise will be coming to a show or expo near you in 2023. Now, on to our interview. Well, Kat, welcome to The Articulate Fly.
Well, hello there. How's everybody?
We're just trying to stay out of trouble. That's kind of my standard saying, and we have a tradition on The Articulate Fly. We like to ask all of our guests to share their earliest fishing memory.
Earliest fishing memory was with my grandfather and my younger brother. We would go fishing. I lived in a little ski resort town, Mammoth Lakes, California, and we would fish the lakes and the creeks and the rivers. We would limit out pretty quickly, and don't tell anybody, but the limit was 10, and we would each get 10, and then we would go home and put the trout back in the house and then go back out and catch another 10. So we really loved to fish.
Yeah, poaching at an early age.
Yes. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. And so when did you get drawn to the dark side of fly fishing?
Recently in May of 2018, I had a friend, his name is Eddie, asked me one day, he says, "Hey, what do you think about going fishing, fly fishing?" And I said, "Okay." And I didn't know what I was getting into. I just thought, I've fished a lot in my younger years, and I thought, sure, why not?
Neat. And, the amazing thing is, you're a self-taught angler and you went from not fishing like 4 years ago and now you guide for Blue Quill Anglers. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and kind of how you improved so quickly?
Yes. So I started fishing, learned how to fly fish over at the Frying Pan with my friend Eddie Yost. And we would go almost every weekend. And we kind of had some parting ties. And I wanted to still kind of learn how to fly fish. And so I decided to take it on. I took myself to the rivers. I tried to figure it out. I struggled out there. When I lost everything on my rig, I had to try to figure it out. There was nobody to ask. And so that's probably how I kind of learned quickly because, if you're out there and there's nobody else to help you, you have to figure it out. And then, of course, I struggled how to catch fish, and I just had to try to figure out where they were and, what the entomology was and observe what's in the river and flying in the air. So I just did a lot of solo trips by myself, and I think that's how I got to really get to know fly fishing. I know it's not, how people normally do it, but I didn't know how good I was until I was fishing, and I would catch fish, and I would turn my head around, and I noticed that there would be somebody watching me. And they would say, "Oh, no, go ahead and fish. It's just fascinating to watch you fish. You're amazing." And I thought, really? Amazing? What is amazing? And it didn't really occur to me how good I was until I started fishing with friends, because friends started to reach out to me and say, "Hey, let's go fishing." And then I realized, gosh, I'm fishing just as well as my friend Phil or my friend Steve or my friend Mike. And who knew? So when I actually got on board with Blue Quill, so there's a story behind that as well. Um, I was kind of doing a evening session out at the Cheeseman Canyon by myself, and I was upriver of a group of guys down below. It was apparently a guided trip. It was a guide with three guys, and I was doing quite well upstream, and they were doing okay down there. I had one of the clients kind of walk up to me and say, "Hey, have you ever guided before?" And I said, "I have." And he says, "I can kind of tell with your casting." And I thought, "Huh, okay." So he went back down to his trip and spoke to his guide. The guide was asking, like, "What's her story?" Because she's like killing it up there. And he said, "Oh, she says she's guided before." And come to find out, it was PJ D'Amico from Blue Quill. Came up to me and said, you've guided before, I understand. Would you be interested to guide again?" I said, "I would." And so I met not only PJ, but I also met Chris Steinbeck. And that's kind of how it all started. They just kind of noticed me on the river, and then we started talking, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, it's neat too, because people also don't understand that you have a really great work situation. So you're able to spend, I don't know, 150, 200 days a year on the water, right?
That is true. Yep. Every chance I can get, I'm out on the river. It's not because of course I love fly fishing, but it also balances out my nursing. It kind of is a good way of decompressing, just that solo time away from that grind. The healthcare is very stressful since the pandemic, and fly fishing takes me away from it. And then, on top of the many days that I am fishing, I'm also scouting and learning the rivers too, for guiding, because I can't be good at what I do unless I go out there and fish it myself.
Yeah, really neat. And I know you're an accomplished downhill skier and motocross racer. I think you raced for 10 years, right?
I did. I
Yeah.
did. I raced in the 30 beginners class. And then I also raced in the women's class. There wasn't a lot of women that raced, but as with fly fishing, I just really put my head to the grind and just practiced and learned the tracks and learned how to, do those doubles and the whip sections and the tabletops. And I didn't want to be that girl that didn't belong out there. I wanted to be just like, I could blend in with the guys. And that was what I shot for.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned before we started recording that you've been skiing since you were 3. So was it a little different experience for you downhill skiing, or did you have a similar kind of really intense focus to improve really quickly there as well?
Downhill skiing, I was pretty good for, I was probably an intermediate skier, strong skier. I didn't get better as a skier until probably when I started to really, turn my calendar around and, put over 120 days into ski season. That's when I really started to really improve and just throw myself almost anything and see if I could successfully accomplish it. Of course, there's steps to getting to that point. Just don't throw yourself down a trail that's not something that you can do. So yeah, I kind of did that one on myself as well.
Yeah. And most of us don't, I would love to have the ability to fish 150 or 200 days a year. So, if you're an angler that can only get to the water kind of a more, I will just say a regular number of days, what are some of your suggestions to kind of come up that learning curve a little bit faster?
There's a couple of things that I noticed with people when I go to the rivers. And of course, we all want to get there quickly. We all want to be out there fishing and getting a fish in the net. I think the one thing that people should think about to improve I always tell people and clients that when you're on your fishing day to just kind of hang tight and don't just jump right into it. A lot of people go right into the river. That I guess they think if they've got waders on, they just go right into the river, and that's how it starts. But I always encourage to not get into the water right away, to fish those edges, because more often than not, there's a lot of fish in there. And how often when you come up to a river, do you see fish just, dart out? So I always encourage people to start slow and easy. Don't get rushed into it, and relax about the whole thing. When I was learning how to fly fish, I would get frustrated and I would see, make more of a mess to myself than I necessarily need to. For example, if you get stuck in the trees or in the bushes, and I would get aggravated and I would lose my temper. But you have to just, take a deep breath and carefully undo yourself. And it's frustrating, but when you put too much anger into it or frustration, it just causes more frustrations. And I think it kind of shows in your performance of fly fishing. So if you don't get out as often, I think, every time you get out there is to practice your casting, practice learning how to read the water and figure out where the fish are, learn the entomology, see what's flying in the air, what can you see in the water that's floating close to the banks. Those are all clues of how to get better, I think. Very basic stuff.
Yeah. And so as you were learning, were you kind of doing the book and the YouTube thing, or I know you've got a lot of really great shops in your area where you kind of go into your favorite shop and asking questions?
I probably, like everybody else, I did do the same thing. I did, come into a fly shop or call a fly shop and say, hey, I'm fishing this river. What do you think I should fish? But I also learned that was not a good way of learning how to fly fish. It all comes, every river and every creek is different. So, and every day is different too. Just because you might have a fantastic day yesterday doesn't mean that today is going to be just as amazing. Things can change with weather, water flows, temperatures of the day, hatches. So there definitely is a lot of learning. And there's no assumption that yesterday is going to be just as amazing as today will be. And, every day you learn something new, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting. So you were kind of discovered on the water by a guide from Blue Quill. But before that, did you sort of have a light bulb moment where you're like, I think I could guide people? I know you said you had guided before, but, when did you sort of get that guide bug?
I was a nursing educator for many years and had some great success, teaching nurses and CNAs, certified nursing aides, to how to, do tasks and procedures and properly, as well as, knowing about policies and procedures. And I thought, if I can teach that, and there's enjoyment in teaching with people, I thought, I really love to fly fish and I really love to teach. Why not teach fly fishing? And I thought, I would love to try the adventures of being a fly fishing guide. And so, I kind of reached out, and it's intimidating as a woman, but, we are all capable ladies out there who are guides. We can be just as good as, all the rest of the guys. So, so that's what I've pursued.
Yeah, that's neat. And so, you were self-taught as a fly angler. Are you kind of the same way on your guide journey, or have you had people that have kind of mentored you into that?
I've had some guidance with the guys at Blue Quill. Also, it's still a learning process. I think, as a guide, I cannot be a good guide unless I am doing my homework. I call it fish homework. So what that is I go out to the rivers or the creeks and I fish it and I study it and I look at the entomology and, where are the fish holding? If I don't do that, I don't think I could be a good guide. So often people will find me fishing by myself, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Is I'm scouting, I'm learning, and I'm making sure that I have my homework done, so that when I have a guide trip, I'm ready. The clients are going to catch fish, and that's the important thing. That's why we're out there, right? So I definitely have to have my game going. So that's what I do.
Yeah, neat. And so I guess Blue Quill is an evergreen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit for folks that may not be familiar with the shop, kind of, what the guide offerings are out of Blue Quill.
So at Blue Quill, they have half day, they have a full day walkway, they have float trips available. We also have private waters, which are fantastic. They have Rawhide, they have Able Ranch, they have Shawnee Meadows, fantastic waters, rivers to fish. What else can I tell you about? So, and I feel like with all these guys that I've met with, they are very knowledgeable what is going on with the rivers. It's great to learn from one another. They also have classes available to learn how to fly fish. There's like Fly Fishing 101. There's women's class, Introduction to Women's Fly Fishing. I got a chance to teach that this summer, and it's really cool to see brand new people who've never fly fished or even touched a fly rod, and see them take their classroom knowledge, and then we go on a half-day guide trip, and then seeing them catch a fish is just amazing, and just how excited they get. There's also, what else is there with the guide offerings? We have, I think we have some of the best guides. We've got Mr. Pat Dorsey, of course. We've got John Kiefover, Bob Dye, Chris Steinbeck. We have some really great people on board, and I feel very welcomed with these guys. They've been very welcoming with having me join on, and it's great. We can collaborate and help one another,
Yeah, it's interesting too, because, with Pat's tailwater books, there are a lot of people that tie those patterns to fish like the South Holston and some of our tailwaters here in the Southeast. That's
probably where I first started to learn how to fly fish, was at a tailwater. So I didn't know, when they say, well, the tailwaters, we fish very small midges, and I got a feeling and understanding of what that was about, because that's where I kind of learned. And so when we get the opportunity to fish larger flies, it's kind of awesome. Yeah, it's neat. It's always interesting to kind of look at kind of the regional, people obviously learn to fish their fisheries. And it was interesting when I was out, and I got the chance to fish with you and Phil and other folks about some of those really interesting things that I think, maybe are not specifically unique to Colorado, but are certainly part of Colorado fishing. Like I would say the proportion of sight fishing that we did that day we fished together, way higher than, what we would generally do in the Southeast, because usually we're covering more water. And then that kind of just pivots into, I think you and I were talking about this last week when we were preparing for the interview, sort of that sight nymphing where you've got, three flies and you're basically fishing that inside track and really kind of dropping the shot to then swing that brace of flies towards the fish. It's kind of interesting, to do that and then to bring it home, right? Yeah, that is true. I didn't actually know a whole lot about sight fishing until, I guess, when I started fishing with Phil, and we fished the Cheeseman Canyon and Deckers, and that was kind of new for me. And now I understand. Wow, now it's so much fun to do that. And interestingly, with clients, they're more often than they're not familiar with that, and when they get to do that, it's pretty exciting for them as well.
Yeah, we've got a couple places here, like on the Davidson River. It's not a tailwater, but there's a lot of the fish are highly pressured, right? And so if they, were to disappear every time they saw a human being, they'd starve to death pretty quickly. But that's a pretty good place. But yeah, it was kind of funny. I think I might have mentioned to you too. It's like I was talking to Landon about that. He's like, "Oh, that's in like chapter 4 of this book that I wrote." And so, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's one of the reasons why I like traveling to fish so much, is you learn so many different things, and then you can kind of bring those home and kind of put them in your toolbox. And and so we're recording this kind of early in November. We've just gotten off daylight savings time. The days are shorter. You want to kind of walk folks kind of through the arc of your fishing season and kind of what it looks like in the guide season for you?
Yeah. So as during springtime here in Colorado, fishing starts to pick up around the months of March and April, and then of course it gets really productive in May and June and July. Summertime is peak season. Now we're into the fall and we're headed towards winter. Fishing is still pretty good right now, and with the mild, warm days that we're having, keep hoping that next week will be the same. And I think last year, the guys were pretty busy until December. So, I mean, even though things are slowing down, there's still some really good days ahead.
Yeah. And then you can get those good little warm afternoon half days in the wintertime, right?
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Occasionally we'll have those 50 and 60 degree days, and that can get out. We're out there, and gosh, that's something to really enjoy during the months of November and December.
Yeah. And so, what's a day on the water like with Cat Toy, and how's it different, do you think, than what other guides do and offer on the water?
I'm not sure if every guide does like what I do. Like I said, I cannot be a great guide unless I do my fish homework. So I will scout and I will fish it before I get a trip on the river. I have to know what's going on, be familiar with the flows, be familiar with the hatches that are going on at that period of time of the year. I think for guides, we're working with people, and I feel like you have to be very people friendly. I think that if you don't have if you're not really interested in people, guiding is probably not your thing. If you really enjoy people and you want to teach them, this guiding is really rewarding. It's extremely exciting, and it's definitely a lot of fun. And you meet some incredibly neat people all over the United States. So it's all about enjoying the day.
Yeah. And, I can't help myself. Every time I have a guide on the podcast, I always like to ask them, what they think the secret is to being a good guide.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think patience is probably the first, to be honest, because not everybody is up to speed as you might be. And you got to be patient with people who are just learning. You got to be knowledgeable of the rivers that we fish. As for me, like I said, I have to fish it to be on board with what I'm guiding with, and to be sure that the clients can get fish. being promptly on time, addressing the client's expectations. We always ask, what are you trying? What do you want to do? Are you just wanting to catch fish? Do you want to gain more knowledge? What is your expectation for the day? So I think that's a good secret to being a good guide, because it's not about, getting clients on fish. It's what are they looking for in their day? So
Yeah.
That's the focus.
Yeah, it's interesting because it always amazes me how reluctant anglers are to even tell their guide what they want to get out of the day, right? Most guides will ask, but even if they do ask, sometimes they're scared to give the wrong answer.
Yeah. It's all about, trying to teach a lot. There's a lot of teaching, a lot of patience. And, if I can't really say I know all the answers, but we can figure it out. It's just taking the time to observe what's around you and be familiar with what's going on with the flies and the hatches. And there are days too, when the water's crystal clear, you can't find any bugs in your seine. There's nothing flying in the air, and that can get tough. So it does take a lot of thinking. And I think people think that it's easy being a guide, but we're doing a lot of brain work that people don't, I think, realize. So there's definitely patience and getting having to be sure that everything is set up right. And
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the easier you make it look, the less the client sometimes thinks went into the experience, right?
Yeah, and you'll get clients that say, well, can you show me how to catch a fish, or show me how to cast, or show me how just demonstrate for me. And it's kind of funny because more often than not, when I do kind of do a few casts and try to demonstrate, more often than not, I'll catch a fish and they're just like, wow, that just looks so easy. You make it look so easy. But it's not.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because I would say one of the great lessons that fly fishing has given me is to teach me that I can only take what the river's willing to give me.
That is true. I would agree with that. I think, depending on the conditions of the river, the weather, and, if there are hatches that are happening and what's going on in the bug's life underneath, on very cold days, sometimes the hatches are very minimal. And so that's probably what the river is giving you. And maybe a slow day, the fish may move. So that you can see what the river gives you.
Yeah. It's interesting too, right? Because you're kind of recently come to fly tying. When did you get interested in tying flies?
I would say the first year, I just was so excited about fly fishing that I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn how to cast right. I wanted to learn how to do the dry fly right. I wanted to learn how to fly tie. And I thought, I'm going to go for this. And so I took one class at a fly shop and I struggled. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a big challenge. Not only am I trying to learn how to fly fish, but I'm also trying to learn how to fly tie. And I did get overwhelmed, and I thought, is this too much for me? Is this a good thing? And I just was persistent about it, and I just wanted to be better at what I did, so I put hours into it. And that, a lot of people watch the videos on YouTube or ask a friend, and um, I I did a lot by myself, and as always, practice makes perfect. And I didn't realize, sometime later when I look back at some of the flies that I tied in the beginning, and I look at them now, and in comparison, I've improved quite a bit. And you won't know unless you save those first flies. And it's really amazing, to catch fish on your own flies. And the first fly that I tied was a WD-40, and I tied like maybe 4 of them, and they didn't look perfect. I thought, well, maybe they'll still catch fish, and sure enough, they sure as heck did. And I thought, wow, I've got to do more of this. So that's how I kind of kept on pursuing the fly tying. It just was so exciting to catch fish on your own flies.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I started tying when I got into it using Skip Morris's book, and I ran into Tim Camisa. I think it was probably at the fly tying symposium, and he might have even been interviewing him for the podcast. He's like, if the flies aren't good, you just need to cut all the stuff off the hook and start over. And so I had a Sunday where I got the razor blade out and probably reclaimed, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 dozen various types of hooks. And looked at those flies, and they were awful, too big, proportions were awful. So, definitely, although I don't know that I probably should have just thrown all that stuff in the trash can and not tried to, cut everything off. But at any rate, so what kind of vise do you tie on?
I tie on a Renzetti 4000 presentation. I really enjoy it. I kind of moved up to that vise last year. I thought I'm gonna keep going with this, and I think about the first vise that I purchased was from actually Amazon. It was just a little startup kit, and I think what you buy is what you can only. Some stuff is you can only do so much, and I feel like if you're going to accelerate, you need to get better equipment. So that's what I've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Those kind of starter C-clamp vices, they don't generally last very long. They just don't hold hooks terribly well, I guess is the nicest thing to say.
Yeah, and they don't. I think my little kit was like a fold-out box, and so it's not a very sturdy base. And so when you would tie, the whole thing would move. And I just thought, well, now I know what it is like to at least start, and now I know I need to upgrade.
Yeah, and so you started on your own, but I also know that you've got a great kind of shop and tying community in the Denver area, and I also know some of the people you tie with. So who are some of those folks, and kind of how have they influenced your tying?
Yeah. So my good friend Philly Wani, we actually reached out to one another and said, "Hey, let's go fishing." And he was, as I've gotten to know him, he was one of Umpqua's fly designers with the No Mercy Midge, and I just was so impressed by his fly and his journey he kind of shared with me of with fly tying. And then, it's been nice to, aside from fly fishing with him, and we will tie often with the West Denver Trout Unlimited. And it's great to get together and everybody will share, you always learn something. Something new and something you get excited about, or some of my friends are excited to, tie one of my flies that I enjoy tying and catch a lot of fish. And then, of course, the other people that have been very influential. I'm very impressed with Charlie Craven, of course, Pat Dorsey. I never thought in a million years would I actually guide with Blue Quill and have a chance to even, guide with Pat Dorsey. So there's a lot of influential tires, and even those that are not on the pro level, we all learn something from one another, and just the creativity that's involved is really cool.
Yeah, it's always amazing, to that point. Like I can remember, particularly when I was working with the Project Healing Waters group here in Charlotte, all these just great tying ideas you would come away with from a group tying session.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just tricks, right?
Yeah, and like, how do you, if you have an issue or a problem that troubles you, and you can ask one of your friends and say, well, how do you make this better? How do I make this easier for myself? And they'll we'll share secrets and ideas, and how to make it better. And it's it's so much fun.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I also like to ask people that tie if they have like a really unusual tying tool that they can't live without.
A good pair of sharp scissors. Nothing is worse than having a dull pair of scissors. I think that is a absolute must for me.
Yeah. And do you have a preferred brand, Dr. Slicks or?
Yes. I do have a pair of Dr. Slicks. And I treat that like gold. I actually, at my fly tying desk, I actually have a tray it's basically like a computer tray, like when you have a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I basically pull that out when I'm tying, so that if my pair of scissors somehow is going to drop on the floor, it won't. It'll drop on the tray. Because nothing's worse than when it seems like every time you drop a good pair of scissors, it lands right on the tips. And once that happens,
it's game over.
Done. It's game over. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. So when my boys were younger, they're old enough to, I guess if they're going to do it, I wouldn't catch them now, but I would tell them, like, under no circumstances were they to come in my office and take any of my tying scissors for any kind of school craft project.
Oh God. Oh gosh, yeah. Can't cut papers or anything like that.
No. Yeah. So between that and like leaving my shotguns alone, they kind of got the message. So before I let you go this evening, Kat, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Well, there's it's awesome to really meet everybody. I'll be tying at a few public events. Looking at the International Sportsman's Expo. I think that's in January of next year. And then, of course, the fly fishing show. I'm not sure exactly where I will be, but I obviously will be floating around Blue Quill and a couple of other great companies, including Mystic Fly Rods and Shop McFly. And then, of course, it's always neat to meet everybody on the rivers. Sometimes I'll be fishing by myself and people will say, hey, it's so nice to meet you. I follow you on Facebook or on Instagram. So, just come out and say hello.
Yeah, that's neat. And so what is the best way for folks to follow your fishing adventures or to book a day with you on the water?
Booking a trip at Blue Quill Angler. You would just have to call the fly shop. And that number is 303-674-4700. And then, of course, like I said, I'm often found on the rivers fishing. There's often times when I go to a river and sometimes I'm not feeling alone. I always bump into somebody that knows me and they're like, hey, are you Kat? Or hey, Kat. And so, and that's all great. I really enjoy it. Just getting to know everybody and getting a chance to fish with people. People always ask me, hey, I'd love to fish with you. I said, hey, let's do it. And you can always find me on, of course, there's the social media, there's Instagram, and there's Facebook. And then I also have my own fly fishing blog. I write blogs for some fly fishing companies. That's probably another way that I've also learned quickly is doing the researching and writing, real informative blogs to help people learn as well.
Yeah, very neat. Yeah, and I'll drop all that stuff. I'll drop the shop information, and then your Instagram and your Facebook handles, as well as the link to your blog, so folks can easily find all of those.
Great, sounds good.
Well, listen, Kat, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your nursing and fishing schedule to spend some time with me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Marvin.
Take care and be well.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. And please remember to head over to www.nor-vice.com to check out all of the holiday goodies and Norvice's 2023 show schedule. Tight lines, everybody.